Chapter 2: The Depth of It. Nora Tills found Biscuit on her porch on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after Ray Dallin disappeared. The sheriff had listed him as a voluntary missing person, a man in his late 50s, retired, no family left nearby, living alone on 40 acres of high desert plateau. The deputy who'd done the preliminary check had noted that Ray's truck was still in the driveway and his wallet was on the kitchen counter, and his coffee maker had been mid-cycle when it ran out of water, which meant it had been cycling and refilling and cycling again for however many days before Nora called it in. The deputy had included these details in his report, and the sheriff had read them and listed Ray as voluntary missing anyway, because the alternative required paperwork and resources that Kittitas County didn't have, and because men like Ray Dallin did sometimes just leave. Grief did things to people. Loss carved strange doors in a person. Nora knew Ray. He wouldn't leave Biscuit. The dog looked like himself except for his eyes, which were filmed over with a gray-white opacity that reminded Nora of cataracts but moved differently. Less like clouding and more like depth, like the color of a very still lake seen from above. He was thin. When she knelt and ran her hands over him, she could feel his ribs with almost no searching. He allowed the examination with the patience of an old dog, which he wasn't. Biscuit was 7, a young dog by any measure, and when she brought out food he ate, mechanically, without the enthusiasm that eating had always produced in him, the whole body wag, the dance of a dog who considered meals a personal triumph. He ate, he sat, he watched. She let him sleep inside that night, on an old blanket in the kitchen, and twice she woke in the dark and padded out to check on him. He was in the same position each time, sitting upright on the blanket, watching the back door. When she turned the kitchen light on and looked into his eyes, she had the feeling she'd had once at 16, looking over the edge of the highway bridge where kids sometimes went to feel dangerous. That drop feeling, that sudden knowledge of depth. She turned the light off and went back to bed and lay there with her eyes open for a while. In the morning she drove to the Howard property. She'd always known the land was there, the way you know about things that sit on your edges, present, half-noticed, the specific invisibility of the familiar. She parked on the county road and climbed the fence, her boots leaving prints in the frosted grass. The plateau stretched wide and flat to the west, the Cascades feigned on the horizon like a smudged pencil line. Ellensburg was 12 miles south. Out here there were only the sound of the wind and the creak of the fence wire, and her own breathing. She found the hole. She knew it immediately, the way you know the thing you've been looking for even before you've articulated that you were looking. It was exactly what it appeared to be, a perfect circle cut in the earth, 4 feet across, the edges worn smooth, the darkness inside it absolute. She picked up a stone and dropped it in. Waited. The October wind moved through the grass. A meadowlark called from somewhere to the south. The stone produced no sound whatsoever, and the hole stared up at the gray sky with the blind patience of something that had been waiting for a long time and had learned not to be impatient about it. Around the hole, the ground was disturbed. Not recently, the frost had reset it, the grass partly straightened, but there had been activity here within the past month. Boot prints, she thought. Multiple visits, and leading away from the hole, in the direction of the eastern fence line, the grass had been pressed down in a narrow track, as though something had dragged itself through it. The track was about the width of a man's shoulders. She followed it to the fence, and then lost it in the harder ground near the county road, and stood there for a moment with the wind cutting through her jacket, thinking about what she knew. She knew that Ray had gone missing 3 weeks ago. She knew that Ray's property abutted this fence line. She knew that a man named Darrow Pell, a local whose reputation involved things sold out of the back of trucks, who had 2 prior arrests and a long list of people in the county who disliked him, had also gone missing, about a month back. The sheriff had not listed Pell as voluntary missing. The sheriff had mentioned to certain people that Pell had owed money to people capable of collecting it permanently. She stood at the fence and looked at the narrow pressed track in the grass and thought about what comes back from a place you can't see the bottom of. The two men came while she was walking back to her car. They were parked on the county road, a gray SUV with government plates that didn't belong to any agency she recognized. They got out as she approached, two men in canvas jackets, one older, one young, both wearing the same assembled expression. They explained that they were conducting a survey of the watershed area. They were very polite. They asked her name, which she gave, and her address, which she also gave, and whether she had noticed anything unusual about the Howard parcel. "Ray Dolan used to walk his dog out here," Nora said. "Have you found him?" The older man's expression did something small and controlled. "We're not with the sheriff's office. Our survey is focused on geological features of the land. He owned the property next door. He's been missing 3 weeks. We're aware of Mr. Dolan's situation," the younger one said, and then appeared to realize he'd said something he hadn't meant to, and closed his mouth. Nora looked at them both for a moment. "There's a hole out there," she said. "Perfectly round. Seems pretty deep." "We're aware of the formation," the older man said. "We'd strongly recommend staying off the Howard property until our survey is complete. The geological instability in this area presents real safety hazards." "How long does the survey take?" "As long as it needs to." He gave her a card. It had a phone number and no other information. "Please feel free to reach out with any concerns." She took the card. She drove home. She sat in her kitchen with Biscuit at her feet and the card on the table and thought about the track in the pressed down grass, about the width of a man's shoulders. Then she looked up the Darrow Pell disappearance on her phone and found what the local paper had printed, 3 short paragraphs, 6 weeks ago, noting that Pell had last been seen leaving a bar in Ellensburg, that his truck had been found at a trailhead, that Sheriff Beaumont was asking for anyone with information to come forward. The trailhead was 4 miles from the Howard property. Pell came to her house on a Thursday night. She saw him through the window before she opened the door, a shape on the porch that was shaped like a man. She'd found his photo online after reading the article, a DMV shot of a thick-necked man in his 40s. This was him. Same canvas work shirt, same jeans. She could see that much through the glass. What she couldn't see clearly was how he was standing. He wasn't standing the way people stand, weight distributed, one hip slightly lower, the small constant adjustments a body makes without thinking. He was vertical the way a post is vertical, held up rather than holding himself up. When she leaned closer to the glass, his head moved toward her in response, a fraction of an inch, and her hand left the curtain and she stepped back before she'd decided to. Biscuit was in the center of the kitchen, every muscle locked, a sound building in his chest that she felt more than heard. She didn't open the door. Pell put his hand through the window. Not the glass, through the frame, through the wall beside the window, the old plaster crumbling away from his forearm like it was wet paper. His hand came through into her kitchen and opened, fingers spread, the palm facing up. The skin was the wrong color, not pale but gray-white, the color of the underside of a river stone. The fingernails were gone. Where they had been, the flesh was smooth and featureless, as though whatever lived below had not yet learned that detail. Nora grabbed the kitchen chair closest to her and brought it down on his arm. The arm didn't pull back. It took the blow and the wood cracked, and Pell's arm didn't react at all, not with pain, not with resistance. It simply remained patient, the hand still open. She hit it again and felt something give under the impact. A wrongness in the give, the resistance of something that was approximating a body rather than being one. She hit it a third time and the hand finally withdrew, not quickly, not urgently, just a slow retraction back through the hole in her wall. She heard him walk off the porch. Slow, even footsteps on the boards, then the steps, then the gravel, receding. She stood in her kitchen with the broken chair in her hands and Biscuit pressed against the back of her legs. Through the hole in her wall she could see the cold outside, the frost on the grass, nothing else. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the lights on until the sky went gray with morning, and then she got in her truck and drove. She stopped at the hardware store when it opened and bought 2 things. Then she drove to her daughter's college in Ellensburg and sat in the parking lot and called her. They talked for 40 minutes about nothing that mattered, a class her daughter was struggling with, a film they'd both seen, the small maintenance of a relationship between people who love each other and are separated by distance. Nora said I love you when they hung up. She sat in the parking lot until she was sure of herself. Then she drove to the Hauer property. It was late morning by the time she climbed the fence. The SUV was not on the county road. She didn't know what that meant and spent no time on it. She crossed the plateau with the frost already melting off the grass, the October sun thin but present, and she went to the barn first. The tractor was where she'd expected it, an old John Deere utility model, 20 years old, kept in better condition than anything else Hauer had left behind. She got it started after some persuasion, backed it out of the barn into the flat light, and drove it out across the Hauer land toward the hole. Pell was there. He was standing at the edge of it, looking down. From the tractor she could see what she hadn't been able to see through the window the night before, the full shape of what he'd become. He'd lost mass, the bulk that the DMV photo suggested, the body's substance redistributed or consumed by whatever process had sent him back up. His neck sat wrong on his shoulders, the angles suggesting something had been reset imperfectly. He was barefoot in the frost and didn't appear to notice. He heard the tractor and turned. His face was Pell's face except for the mouth, which was open too wide, stretched at the corners, and inside it was darkness, not the ordinary darkness of a mouth, not teeth and tongue, but the same absolute dark as the hole itself, the darkness that produced no echo and had no bottom. His eyes were open and there was nothing behind them. The thing that had been using them to see had not bothered to maintain the performance. He moved toward her. He moved faster than he should have been able to, the lurching speed of something that had not learned the full cost of a human body, that did not protect its joints and bones the way a living person would because it didn't need to. She heard something crack in his knee when he crossed the uneven ground and he didn't slow. She swung the tractor hard to the left, and the front corner caught him at the shoulder and he went down. And she drove over the space where he'd fallen and brought the tractor around and he was already up, one arm hanging at an angle that meant the shoulder was gone, the arm flopping loose with each step, and he came at her again from the left. She ran him into the fence. The tractor hit him full and he folded against the wire and the wire held and she kept the tractor pressed there for a long time, engine straining, until the movement on the other side of the blade stopped. When she backed up, Pell was on the ground against the fence, and he was not getting up. He was still looking at her, the mouth still open, the darkness inside it unchanged. She left him there and drove back to the hole. She made 3 passes with the blade before the earth pushed back. The first pass caved the northern edge cleanly, good dark soil folding in. The second pass took the western rim. On the third pass the blade met resistance from below, not the resistance of packed earth or rock, but pressure, active and deliberate, the hole contracting and then expanding like a muscle, pushing the fill back out. A low sound came from it, below hearing, something she felt in her back teeth and the base of her skull. She made another pass. The earth pushed back again, harder. The fill she'd moved scattered outward across the grass and the hole was the same size it had always been, patient and round, and from it now came a smell for the first time, cold stone and something older than stone, something that had no association in her memory and rooted itself there anyway. She sat on the tractor with the engine idling and looked at the hole. She understood then that she could sit here all day and accomplish nothing, that the hole was not a physical problem, that you couldn't fill something from the outside that was determined to remain open. She sat there, and the plateau was quiet around her, and the thin sun moved a little further down the sky. Ray appeared at the fence line. She had been half expecting him, and was still not ready. He crossed onto the Hauer land the way the Pell thing moved, too controlled, too deliberate, the walk of a body under outside direction. He was wearing the clothes she'd last seen him in, and his face was his face, and his eyes were the deep gray-white that Biscuit's had become. He walked to the hole and stopped beside it and looked across at her on the tractor. She climbed down. They stood on opposite sides of the hole, 10 feet apart, and she looked at him for a long time. His chest was moving. He was breathing. Some version of Ray Dolan was present in that body. She could feel it the way you can sometimes feel a word on the tip of your tongue, almost there, straining toward expression. "Ray," she said. His mouth opened, and what came out first was just sound, not language, not numbers, a low resonant tone that the hole amplified and returned. She felt it in her chest. Then the sound broke apart into something that was trying to be his voice, assembling itself from available components. Nora, her name, the way he'd always shortened it, just that syllable, but it was his rhythm, his worn flat vowel, unmistakably Ray. She put her hand over her mouth. His face was working. Something labored behind it, fighting the current of whatever held him, and for a moment the gray eyes cleared just enough that she could see him looking at her from inside what he'd become. He looked at her the way you look at a person when you are trying to give them something important without being able to speak. Then he looked down at the hole. Then back at her. She understood. She shook her head once, hard. He looked at the hole again, then at his own hands, with the same long attention she'd seen before, a man memorizing something. He looked out at his property, the fence line, the house just visible over the rise. He was taking inventory, saying goodbye to things in a specific order. "Don't," she said. Her voice came out stripped of everything except the word itself. He looked at her one final time, and what was in his face, Ray's face, fully his for just that moment, was not fear or sorrow. It was the look of a man who has worked out a problem and found the only solution available and made his peace with it. A science teacher's face. 31 years of here is how it works, here is what it costs, here is the answer. He stepped into the hole. He didn't fall. He lowered himself in, hands on the rim, controlled, and then he let go, and then he was gone. From below, a sound came up, not his voice, but something that had his shape, a resonance, a presence pushing upward against the earth, bracing. She was already climbing back onto the tractor. She worked fast, pass after pass, driving the blade in from every angle, pushing the plateau's dark soil into the throat of the hole. This time the earth didn't push back. This time the fill settled and held, something below accepting it now instead of rejecting it, something below holding the walls in place so the ceiling could take. She didn't let herself think about what that meant. She drove the blade and the soil moved and the hole got smaller, and then it was a depression, and then it was flat ground, and the resonance from below faded by degrees until there was nothing, not the aggressive nothing of before, the nothing that swallowed sound, but ordinary silence, the silence of sealed earth, the silence of things at rest. She sat on the tractor with the engine off for a long time. Biscuit, who had followed her from the house without her noticing, lay down at the edge of the flattened ground and put his head on his paws. After a while his breathing slowed, and went even, and then quietly stopped. She watched it happen and didn't look away. In the distance, on the county road, the gray SUV appeared. It sat there for a long time, engine running. Then it pulled away south toward Ellensburg, and she didn't hear it return. She climbed down from the tractor. She thought about Ray walking his fence line every morning with Biscuit ranging ahead. She thought about the pie she'd brought over in September, how he'd insisted on making coffee, how he'd asked about her daughter with the care of a man who had very few people left to ask about. She thought about what it must have cost him, that particular kind of man, to come back to this whole day after day and feel everything he built his life on slowly stop making sense, and still come back, still look into it. She thought he had probably loved it, a little, before it took him, before he took himself. The ground was flat and unremarkable where the hole had been. The plateau stretched wide under the hard blue of a Washington October sky. The meadowlarks were calling. The frost was gone from the grass. Everything looked exactly as it should, and she knew she would spend the rest of her life knowing what was underneath it. She walked back to her truck. She didn't look back. She knew better by now than to look back.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.